And then along comes Mary, and though she was a...
We had to do that. And that no disrespect to the Holy Mother. When I read it, the first thing I thought about was that Association song, and it was a great band, a lot of good Up With People music, just positive stuff, and I don't know, it felt like the right thing to do. And thank you, Ashley, for that really cool Peter Max kind of feel, that art that you did to promote this week's sermon. I always enjoy seeing what you come up with. Anyway, it seems reasonable that we spend some time today really reflecting on Mary and her importance to our faith. We don't do that quite as much in our tradition, but I think it's important that we do spend some time. I remember 2 years ago, Beth and I went to the Holy Land and we visited Nazareth, and we went to the Church of the Annunciation, which is where this particular episode takes place. And a big, beautiful church is built around the site. We were able to kind of see the site. But one of the things that was really exciting and cool about this is that there were these huge murals from all over the world that depicted Mary, and they had all kinds of different ways of expressing their love for Mary. And the one from the United States was more of a modern sort of thing, but in any event, lots of different interpretations, and it was just simply, it was powerful, it was neat, it was just a good thing. And interestingly enough, kitty corner from the Church of the Annunciation is about a 100-yard 9-iron to the synagogue where Jesus preached his first sermon. So an interesting space and an interesting time. But you know, Mary, as she is presented with this amazing news from Gabriel, she's probably about 13 years old. I mean, back in the day, girls got married at the age of around 13, 14. As soon as they break into puberty, they were getting married. So this was certainly not uncommon. And for her, she's a kind of a peasant girl. She's part of that 90% I talk about. In Palestine. She didn't have a whole lot and lived in relative humility, particularly being a girl. But on the other hand, she was not unaware, you see, of life in Palestine. She was not unaware of Torah, and she was not unaware of the books of the prophets. She would have probably come out of that Pharisee line of faith, which paid a lot of attention to the prophets. So when she hears this message from Gabriel, she recognizes not only the profound responsibility that she will have, but she also recognizes in some sort of a way that this amazing birth that will take place will be a source of joy, but probable heartache as well. And she goes and after she is pregnant, she goes to see Elizabeth, who is 6 months pregnant. And of course, Elizabeth is going to birth John the Baptist, cousin of Jesus. And she's starting to understand also by talking to Elizabeth and then reflecting even more on the significance of what this baby is and what the birth will mean. She's starting to really settle into the fact that the Mashiach is it's a powerful demonstration of shalom, but there's lots of challenges as well. And so she waits to give birth month after month, and finally, shortly before the birth, she and Joseph, they are still in Nazareth, and then they journey south to Bethlehem. It's a long shot. I'm not 40, 50, 60 miles south, something like that, but it's pretty good distance in those days. And so they head down to Bethlehem to participate in the census and this and that. And of course, they couldn't find a place there. And she's 9 months pregnant and feeling whatever. I mean, it's got to be tough. And they can't find a place, but they finally find a household with a manger that's willing to put them up. Now, very humble, useful to understand, a manger back in the day was kind of the equivalent of an attached garage, okay? So it's like, it was like an attached garage, no cars, but animals, usually, unless the sheep were out in the field at night, and then it could have been empty. But in any event, this manger, likely there was a half wall where if you were in the manger, you could look into the living area and back and forth, but humble nonetheless. And finally, she does give birth, and she goes through the childbirth, and she gives birth. And once again, there's this reconfirmation of who Jesus is. Shortly thereafter, shepherds who were in the fields a couple miles away from the house, they come and reconfirm the significance of the birth. And she begins to understand just that much more deeply the profound responsibility that she has for this child. 7 days later, Joseph and Mary and the baby, they go to the temple, right, in Jerusalem, and they dedicate the baby and name him Jesus. And at the temple, there is a guy named Simeon who is, again, prophesying about who this is and the fact that he is the prophet of Shalom. He is the person that will, in a sense, set Israel free. But Simeon also extends the width of the ministry, because he will be there not only for Jews, says Simeon, but Gentiles as well. So we already begin to understand the platform of this ministry and what it might mean. And he makes it clear to Mary, it's going to break your heart. It's going to break your heart. And so they return back to Bethlehem. She's taking in all of this. And then a little while later, she is visited by Magi from the east. They again reconfirm who this Jesus is. Once again, people from hundreds of miles away, 700-800 miles away, journey to see Jesus. They reconfirm, and now the stakes start to increase as far as what the magnitude of this means for Mary and her family and her son. Joseph clearly understands in a dream they better get out of Dodge. Their lives are in jeopardy, and they exile to Egypt. They leave their home because they are fearful for their lives. And they stay. And Mary goes through this process. She travels a great distance to Egypt. That's a long shot from Bethlehem. It's a heck of a journey. And she experiences that fear and that frustration and the challenges of that. And finally, the family can go home. Herod is dead, and they understand they are free to move back home. They don't go back to Bethlehem now. They go actually all the way back home to Nazareth. And all that time, Mary is there for Jesus. She's teaching Jesus. She's caring for him as a mother would. She's doing the things that mothers do. She's holding in her heart the unique understanding of who her son is. And finally, Jesus, he takes off, he gets baptized, the ministry begins, right? And she's with him a lot of the time. As a matter of fact, Mary is with Jesus when he performs his first miracle. Remember that wedding in Cana? Mary's sitting next to Jesus. They're at a wedding. They run out of wine, and she just pokes Jesus in the ribs and says, "Do something." And Jesus says, "It's not my time. I shouldn't be doing anything." She says, "Get up there and do something." So what does he do? He turns the water into wine. And I guess it's even better than the wine they served originally. So it's amazing wine. But Mary is always there for her son. And sometimes she nudges him into action. Finally, she's with Jesus when he dies on a cross. She's been there that whole time. She has to be in Bethany the week before. She has to be nearby. And finally, Mary sees her son nailed to a cross. She sees her son ridiculed and mocked and spat upon. She sees her son abandoned by most of his friends. She's there for him, always there for him, no matter what. And she's there for him as he's about to die, and Jesus looks at Mary, John, the one disciple that stays there. He looks at the two of them. He says, you two, you gotta hang together. And they do. And she's there on Easter night in the upper room to see her son again as he visits his disciples. We don't know a lot more about Mary, but it's reasonable to assume she spent her days in and around Jerusalem, because John did. Initially, most of his time was in Jerusalem. After Jesus dies and the next wave of the way starts, John, James the Just, who may have been Mary's son or stepson, and Peter formed a power trio, let's say, to launch that next wave of mission journeys and so on. And so she's likely right there throughout all of that. And at some point she dies. We don't know exactly when. But it's interesting, my friends, to recognize this gift, this person who demonstrates courage, humility, commitment, and carries the pain of that with her throughout her life. Matter of fact, you look at Christianity, 2/3 of Christianity pays overwhelmingly profound respect to Mary and reveres her in a very powerful way. That's certainly the Eastern Church and the Roman Catholic Church. And it's interesting to note that all of Islam pays great homage to Mary. She is featured in the Quran, and she is highlighted in that particular book. In our tradition, we don't pay as much attention to Mary for various theological reasons, but it is reasonable for us to reflect on her life, to draw from her own experience, to be fed in a way from the experience that she presents to each of us, and to recognize that without Mary, we probably wouldn't be here. Amen.